Hi everyone, it's Katie and I'm here today with a much requested, long awaited Circo Tarot review. Now this is a deck that I've had for a very long time. I backed this edition on Kickstarter. I think this is the second edition, although I'm not 100% sure. It's been available a couple of different times, and I know this wasn't the first because I kept seeing it online and I was obsessed, and then when I went to finally get it, it was out of print. So when this came up on Kickstarter, it's one of the very few decks that I've backed, and I backed it gladly and willingly and immediately. So this is not the edition that will be coming out very shortly again, so I'm not sure if there will be maybe changes with the cardstock or whatever, but I did want to give you a review of the deck that I have because I mean obviously I don't think there's going to be many changes in terms of the artwork and what you're getting. So I'm hopeful that this review will give you an idea of whether this new edition coming out is something you want to invest in, and so I hope you find this review helpful. So we'll start, of course, with what the deck came in, and it is this really lovely handmade, hand-printed bag, which has like a little plait closing. So this is how I store my deck, in this little bag, which also fits the hand-bound little white book, which is super cute. And in here you get a pretty basic rundown of all of the meanings. Like we just have a few kind of keywords, which I think is more than enough for, you know, to kind of get going. It is very Rider-Waite based. Like I don't think you need any extra information from the artist because pretty much if you know the Rider-Waite Smith, you know this deck. So we do have the Celtic cross here and an explanation of how to do that, and a past, present, future. So we have a couple of spreads, but they're pretty generic spreads, not specific so much to the Circo Tarot. But it is a little good book to have. Now on to the most important part, the cards. Now, as I said, I don't know if the upcoming edition will have any changes, but this edition that I have, these are the backings, and they are quite glossy. As you can see, it's kind of like hand printy, but that's all right. I don't really mind. And it is quite a thick deck because the cards are very, very thick. Not too thick to the point where you can't shuffle, but it is certainly something that you notice. In terms of the size of the card, they're pretty, well, a traditional sort of size. They're pretty much the same as my Centennial Rider-Waite Smith, maybe just a tiny bit bigger, but it's, yeah, a tiny bit taller and maybe a tiny bit, yeah, just a tiny bit taller basically. And of course the it does have quite rounded corners. And the lovely thing about these cards is that they are borderless. As you can see, they're fairly glossy, but they're not sticky. And that is my main complaint with glossy cards, not so much that they're shiny, it's more that very often they're sticky. But that hasn't been my experience with the Circo Tarot. So we'll have a look at the cards, and as you can see, you get like this very small out of the way number of the card and the title down the bottom. So it's definitely clearly labeled, but it doesn't, you know, it's not in the way, it doesn't detract from the imagery at all. And these are just super fabulously colorful, vibrant, alive images on these cards, and I mean that is what I love so much about this deck. Look at this Magician. As you can see, very traditional. We have like the 4 suits on the table here, and the Magician with, you know, one hand up in the air with a wand and the other pointing down in this kind of garden sort of scene. So it is, all of the kind of classic base symbolism is here in almost all of the cards. Again, we have the High Priestess, and instead of having her, you know, towers next to her, she has her arms black and white with the B and the J, and this kind of big long tail to her dress, with the stars and the moon, and pomegranates up around her, and even just like the crescent moon and the cross. So it's all here, just done in a really fun, beautiful, beautiful way. Look at this Empress. And of course all the people are coloured very interestingly, like pink and blues and whatever else. We have plenty of that symbolism here with the Emperor too. Very striking colours with the Emperor and the Hierophant. We even have his supplicants here, although we only see the hands. But we have the keys, and he's holding his cross. Yeah, it's beautiful. In terms of reading with this deck, this is, you know, fairly not traditional, although this is the sort of imagery we see very often in the Lovers cards that do deviate from the more traditional Lovers cards of a couple. And I love these backgrounds, how pretty, and I don't know, I just think they're beautiful. The Chariot, a little bit modern. She's in a car, but it works. I love this Strength card, where, you know, she's wearing the lion. She's become the lion. She's one with the lion. I don't know, I really like it. And the Hermit, instead of his lantern, she has a torch, and she's also wearing this veil, but she's up in the mountains. And what I love about this deck is not only how beautiful it is and vibrant, I just adore the colours, I really do. I find it really enjoyable to read with. Love this Hanged Man. We have the Hanged Woman, and she's a circus performer up in the air. It's a bit of fun. And the Death card. A little bit different, but you know, it's still very much death. I do find this a really, really fun, easy deck to read. It definitely has a bit of a playful feel about it. I think, you know, that's pretty obvious given the imagery. And I think this tower, it kind of really hits home. Oh, no pun intended. Like literally a house on fire, and like coming home to see that, like it just feels a little bit more, I don't know, like this is almost more hard-hitting than a giant tower coming crashing into the sea. You know, like we still have the lightning, we still have the fire, we still have this kind of turbulent water at night time, but it's your home. I don't know, like there's just something a little bit more personal about that makes it a little bit more emotional, I think, in many ways. I think this star is just beautiful. I love this star. I love so many of the cards, but it is a really easy deck to read with. It's a really fun deck to read with, and this is really quite different, isn't it? I've always found that so interesting. And I just love reading with this deck, and I mean, it looks fabulous to begin with, but the cards just seem to flow together like in a larger spread. Everything just seems to come together in a really beautiful way, a very seamless, effortless way, which I just adore. And a lot of the imagery, you know, being the Circo Tarot, a lot of it is quite, you know, lots of circus sort of stuff going on, which makes sense, although not exclusively. Like it doesn't feel like a novelty deck about the circus. I love this Five of Pentacles. We have the footsteps kind of going through the snow, out in the cold on your own. But I mean, you can see this as walking away from it, or however it comes up in the reading. And all these kind of just like bare twigs. I don't know, it's quite moving. I like this Six of Pentacles too. There's just so much I enjoy about this deck. I love this Eight of Pentacles. She's like sewing these pentacles onto her own dress that she's wearing at the moment. Like, you know, these skills that she's developing in sewing, you really see them kind of becoming part of her, and, you know, maybe perhaps part of her identity, or how, you know, she works in the world. I don't know, there's just something very interesting about her, you know, actually sewing these onto herself, onto what she's wearing. I think it's really beautiful. And the Nine of Pentacles, I mean, she still has her little bird. Oh, I love it. And the Ten of Pentacles is just a bunch of money, which I think is such a fun kind of on the nose a little bit way to portray the Ten of Pentacles. And I think it's really cool. I think it's really fun. I really like a lot of these court cards. You know, even though we have this very cartoon sort of imagery, I think a lot of them are just really personable. They certainly have character to them, which makes them easy to connect to. And I know that, you know, sometimes the court cards, that can be a bit of a challenge for people. And I certainly find, you know, that isn't an obstacle for me at all with the Circo Tarot. The cups are some of my favourite cards. I think just the colouring is so beautiful. And I love just like the shape of these cups that have been used. I don't know, they're just really cute. I love this image too. I think it's so beautiful. So much of this deck is just gorgeous. It certainly has kind of like a more pastel pinks and blues and greens vibe. I love this. But it certainly does have those kind of pops of really sharp, bright colours, as well as some of the darker ones. Like there's a lot going on in here. And I think, you know, maybe it could feel too busy, or like there's too much going on, or there's not a lot of cohesion. But because of those softer blues and pinks, like they just draw together really well. I don't ever feel like, you know, cards don't fit in this deck. You know, this one is quite different with that black and the red, but it never feels out of place. Everything kind of just really feels like it belongs, and like it adds to the deck, and like it offers something new in amongst all the other cards. Really like this 10 of Cups. I love this like rainbow, like, you know, in the Rider-Waite-Smith we have a rainbow, and this is kind of just like a mix of all of those colours. I really like it. And I've spoken about this card before, the Page of Cups. This is my favourite Page of Cups that I've ever seen. And the first time I saw it, I just laughed out loud. I just thought it was the most simple but brilliant take on the Page of Cups, and it's still just, I just adore it. I think this kind of really sums up the kind of the playful humour of this deck. The Knight of Cups. I love it. I really love this deck. I love this Queen of Cups and kind of sitting in her clamshell. She's beautiful. There's just so much to like about this deck. And we have a merman for the Knight of Cups, or the King of Cups, excuse me. And then we have our wands. So I think this deck is really super easy to read because it is really quite close to the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's just done in its own way. I love this. Like we still have someone kind of going off and planning where they're headed. It's just, you know, a little bit circusy. Really like this Four of Wands. Isn't that beautiful? Just the colours. This Five of Wands. Still get that kind of power struggle, combative sort of feeling going on there. And the Six of Wands. To me, this has always felt like this person is collecting the wands. Like they've been successful, they've been given these, you know, these flowers of success, these rings of flowers that people have made them, and now they're going through and like collecting their winnings or something, if that makes sense. That's what it's always kind of looked like to me. And I really like that. I like this kind of bird person. I've always found this quite an interesting depiction of the Eight of Wands, which is often depicted with those 8 wands flying through the air at top speed. But to me, this looks like trees or like stumps or wands in like a sinking sand pit or something, or mud, like they're stuck. So that's been a really, like, this is probably the one that is most different, at least in how I see it, which is really quite interesting, I think. And I mean, perhaps this speaks to the idea of if we struggle against something, then the progress becomes difficult and slower, as opposed to if we just let it happen. Yeah, it's an interesting card. It's Nine of Wands. And the Ten of Wands. Again, we have this kind of bird person, but very traditional imagery. We have our Page of Wands. Our Knight of Wands is a lizard in the desert, which I really like. The Queen of Wands. She has her black cats, and just the way that she's staring into your eyes, like she's absolutely sure of herself, entirely confident, and really quite alluring and sexy, which I'm into. And then the King of Wands, you know, has his own lizard on his shoulder. the Ace of Knives, so the swords are replaced with knives, and it's really kind of the only change, and you know, quite a simple, easy to grasp one. Two of Knives. I love this colouring in the back, isn't that just gorgeous? The Three of Knives. I really like this Four of Knives, just the colours. You know, they're blue, but they're very muted and greyed. Like everything kind of just come to a standstill. Really beautiful. Five of Knives. We very much get that idea of, you know, one person succeeding, but at what cost? You know, she's won 3 knives and she has the other 2, and these 2 people behind her drowning. Yeah, it's a pretty clear portrayal of the traditional meaning there. You have the Six of Knives. And the 7. 8, we have her all bound up and blindfolded. And it kind of looks like this blackness is dripping down over what was colourful and beautiful. And it's coming top down, so I feel like it's the mind, the higher up, kind of starting to really taint and block out what's beautiful around her. And 9, she's all vulnerable and totally exposed and not having a good time of it. The 10 of Knives. I think this is quite interesting that we have the body covered, but in this really red fabric, as well as the face, but we still have all of these knives stabbed into every part of the body, not just the back. And we have the Page, and I love how he has a target in the background that he's aiming for. I think that's really clever. And then we have the Knight off running, and he's got his knife in his boot, ready for whatever confrontation he might come up against. And the Queen, I love how she has her eyes closed and she's calm, and she kind of looks very still in amongst all this movement around her. And finally we have the King. So those are all of the cards of the wonderful Circo Tarot, and just a little bit about, you know, how I find working with this deck. I mean, I don't have a lot of, you know, really kind of mysterious, magical experiences with it to share with you, because I think at the end of the day, this is just a really approachable, fairly traditional, easy to access sort of a deck. It's just one of those decks that I pull out and I start reading and everything's very clear and easy. You know, there's no kind of fishing for the meaning. It's just there. It's just there for you. That's been my experience with this deck. I also just really enjoy working with it. There's something quite light and playful about it, even if it doesn't, you know, avoid those harder sort of messages. It still puts them on the table simply and clearly, but it's still quite a playful, fun deck, and it's certainly just a joy to read with it. So of course, if you have any comments or questions about this deck, if I haven't answered something that you'd like to know, feel free to leave that below and I will do my best to get back to you. And if you have this deck and you have any further comments to make, I'd love to hear those as well. And I hope you found this video helpful and or interesting, and much love to you all. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!